Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Entrepreneur Mind Speak. I'm Lauren with Crème de Mint, a branding and packaging design agency. And I'm here with my co-host, Natalie.
Hi, I'm Natalie, founder of Cloud Create Web Development based in Tampa.
And today we have Megan Furhman-Wheeler from Megan & Co. Thank you so much for being here, Megan.
Thanks so much for the invite. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited. So tell us a little bit about how Megan & Co. got started, like what inspired you to start the company.
Megan and Company is located in rural Iowa, so very small town in northwest Iowa. And so the story behind it is I grew up in the area and I grew up in the 90s, and around that time, herbal medicine was non-existent in small counties in northwest Iowa. And I grew up with epilepsy. So I lived about 17 years with epilepsy, searching for some other answers outside of Western medication. I was introduced to herbalism in 2012, and it was immediately responded well with my body. So 3 months after that first introduction, I was enrolled in herbal school, and 2 years after, I knew I wanted to bring the knowledge back to Northwest Iowa. So that's really where the foundation of it came from, is my own struggles with having seizures and looking for some other option.
It's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, it is an incredible story, Megan, and I definitely feel like, I mean, you bring so much more knowledge and passion because of that background that you have. And just knowing how other people are struggling with their issues, you can relate to having felt that way for so many years and then discovering something that actually helps.
Yeah,
I mean that
it
you must be
was.
able to connect with
Yeah.
your audience or with your, I don't want to say audience, but like connect with your customers,
Mhm.
your clients just so much more easily because you can relate.
There's this point with my customer base where you I can see it when you walk in the door, where they've been to doctor after doctor and they're at this dead end. And at that dead end, you're open to anything. It's anything's on the table. And a lot of my customers are at that point, and I was at that point for years and trying, just seeking for anything. When I was at that point, I was having 3 grand mal seizures a week. So I was unemployed. I was in the emergency room with dislocated shoulders. So it was a awful, awful situation for me. And to find and be introduced to just one single plant that turned it around, it was a shocking experience. Yeah.
I have
Wow.
goosebumps and like
Mhm.
hearing like one single plant made all the difference for
Yeah.
you. That is
Yeah.
really cool.
Mhm. So that's my hope. It could just be one plant for one person. It could be just spending time and knowing that there's options. And that's why I'm here.
It's amazing to hear that it also made such a drastic difference for you. I feel like that's not something that's regularly communicated. It,
Yes.
even in some of the more alternative options that you get, the intensity with which it can help is not really communicated that well.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, just as probably you felt, and your customers probably feel like such a relief that they find you. Like, what a miracle in itself.
And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of healing that went in to get for where I'm at right now, versus where I was at that point. But the one plant that I am speaking of was skullcap. So it was a herb that I was introduced to, and I started taking it for 1 month. And that 1 month, I only had one seizure versus the three a week. And so to me, it was just a huge transformation. And from that, I was able then to identify triggers. So it led me on a path of healing. So it allowed me to really understand what was causing my seizures. Mhm. That is the root of what Megan and Company has derived from.
What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you launched?
Yes. So Megan and Company opened in 2017 in Northwest Iowa. And at that time, herbal medicine and natural healing still was kind of in the beginning stages. It was prevalent in urban areas. You could find apothecaries and herbs in Whole Foods and things like that, but not necessarily in smaller town areas. And so when I first launched, it was very much an educational aspect. Every person that came in the door, I was educating of what exactly what was an apothecary, what do you do with herbs? What was my purpose there?
Even speaking one-on-one about this kind of thing can sometimes be hard for somebody to understand, let
Yeah.
alone educating a community. So that's a very amazing that you persevered and you made it through all these years.
Well, at the root, I had my story. And so
Yes.
that's really what it's the connection with people. If my communication about the broad spectrum of the herbs didn't connect, then I could always revert to the effect it had on me. And people always responded with that.
And were there any like early surprises that happened in your business?
I always knew in my intuition that it was going to be successful. I didn't expect it to be so successful so fast.
I love hearing
Yes,
that. That's
yes,
amazing.
yes. So that was it was that initial growth spurt that I was unprepared for. Or I attended the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism in Boulder, Colorado, and I was also working in an apothecary while I was attending school. And so I was getting a little bit of hands-on experience at that time. I was home maybe for Thanksgiving around my second year of school, and it was a 3-year time period that I was away for school. And during that second year, I told my parents that I had a 10-year plan to open an apothecary. And my parents were like, "Well, why is it 10 years? Let's speed this up." And so they started, as soon as I was back, they started sending me properties that were up for sale in the area. And by the time I graduated the following year, we had nailed down a property. And so I graduated in 2016 in June. I had purchased the building in 2016 in August, and we did a renovation and we had opened again in July. And my parents helped me fast track it because they were so encouraging. Then my whole last year of school, I made a business plan and started testing products on my classmates. And I was also listening to frequent customer requests and things like that while I was working in the apothecary. So that kind of started my traditional first line of defense of products that came out.
Wow, so you were like doing your research as you were in school, kind of finishing out. That is incredible. I can definitely see
Mhm.
how it got fast tracked.
Yes, yep.
When we first were introduced, that was
Mhm.
when you were thinking about doing a redesign. What prompted you to want to do that redesign at that point? And I'm just curious, like, were there any specific like feedback or
Mhm.
anything from customers or retailers, something that influenced your decision to rebrand at that time?
It was just after COVID. During COVID, I took a class through Goldman Sachs, and it's called the Small Business 10,000 Small Business program. So it's a free program through Goldman Sachs for small businesses, and it's essentially a 6-month master class for business programs. And during that, it allowed me to kind of forecast both the health field, but also Megan and Company. And in that forecasting, I saw this massive growth in the health field in the next 10 years. And I looked at my products and I realized that they couldn't compete with that forecasting with where they were packaging wise. Product wise, like the material is good, but they couldn't compete from the consumer point of view as well as a wholesaling point of view. And so that's what led me to the rebrand.
And what specifically, when you say that, was it just like you were comparing like other competitors and seeing how your brand kind of measured up to their brand? Was it that, or was it something?
Not quite. It was, I had done it all myself so far.
Mhm.
So, and it had never met my vision of what I
Ah,
wanted the
okay.
products to be. And
Okay.
so I had done all the graphic design myself. I had utilized everything intern. I had just basically stream rolled it as well as I could to get the products out on the floor internally. And it never met the my internal vision of the quality of the products.
It wasn't showing the quality of the products through the branding.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it got you really far though
it
at the
did.
same time. So
It did.
your
Yep.
initial branding and, the product itself was so good and your passion and all of these things, like it got you really, really far. But you wanted to, really have that full vision to be able to take it much further. And so
Yep.
that's what took you to the rebranding.
There was a second thing that happened during COVID. It was the containers. I was sourcing my containers in the US. When I was doing my research on the containers, at that time, there was no glass manufacturers for containers in the US. And my products, because they have essential oils, they need a glass or else it's going to seep out. And so I was essentially sourcing it from a third party that was probably getting it from China or another, maybe South America. And so the cost of that was higher than if I made a direct import. And so I wanted to create a direct import for my containers and bypass that third
Mhm,
party.
mhm, mhm.
And so in doing so, I was had a broader choice of my container options too, and it could better suit my needs.
Right, and you landed on this glass containers with like bamboo type
Correct. Yeah.
tops, and yeah,
Yeah.
they look really beautiful.
Sweet.
Um, and then let's talk about, so we did a rebrand together, redoing the logo and label design for all of your products. How did customers respond to the changes, and did you see any shifts in sales, engagement, partnerships? Like what talk to me a little bit more about that.
So that whole process has been extremely interesting because the feedback is wonderful. I feel like the product now, the outside meets the inside.
Mhm.
The internal product has always been extremely high quality, and now it is housed in a container that represents it. And I initially went through that process so my consumers would have that immediate response, but I didn't know that I would have more confidence talking about the products too. That was something surprising. And I realize it because I don't have to cut through the fog of that first container and try to convince my customers that the quality is inside because it's already there. There's just so much less that I have to actually explain.
So glad you shared that because, like, one of the things that I always say to new clients is I want it to speak to your customer, but I also want it to speak to the owner, like, whoever is going to be like the person who is selling it, the person who's behind the business. Because if they don't love it, they aren't going to have the confidence, like you said, to sell it and to talk about it. And I love also that you shared that, yeah, not only did it allow you to feel more confident, but then your customer already had confidence just from that initial like visual, impact of seeing the product. They're like, "Oh, yes, we understand this and this is
Mhm.
quality." So that is so cool. I'm so excited to hear you share that.
And I don't know if it's a change in culture or if it's a change in packaging or a combination of both. But the education that I do now with customers coming in the store is like zero compared
Wow.
to when we open. Because
Oh,
people
wow.
walk in, and if they're new in the store, we allow them to walk around, we greet them. But the packaging speaks for itself. A customer can pick up a bottle and read everything that they need on the packaging. And that
Mhm.
was my end goal because in wholesale, I want those packages to speak for themselves if I'm not there. And it does that in store as well.
That's great. That is so
Yeah,
interesting. So that probably changed your process in the store a little bit.
it did. Yeah.
Wow, wow.
It freed up a lot of our time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Another thing we did was work on your website. Natalie and I worked on it together. At the beginning, I remember it wasn't generating many product sales. Has that changed since the redesign and the photo shoot that we collaborated on?
It has, yeah, it has. The core has always been the shop. I have this common statement of people coming in, they'll stop in the store and they'll say they'll drive 2 or 3 hours to get to the store. And I say, you can refill this online. And they say, oh, it's just so much better being in the store.
So one of the things we had talked about when we were doing the photo shoot is that we wanted to bring the feeling of the store into the website, and that's why we did the videos at the
Yeah.
top because we
Mhm.
wanted them to feel that experience. And like you said, nothing will replace that experience of being in
Mhm.
the store. Um, so we hope to kind of, do the best
Yeah.
that we can, right? And
Mhm.
visuals and in the experience. But probably when they go to your website, they're like, oh, I just want to go to the store. That's
That's
so nice.
that's what it's like a long, it creates, if you've been in the store, it almost creates a longing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if
Which
you
is
haven't,
interesting,
yeah,
right?
if you haven't been in the store, then I think it generates sales. If you haven't been to the physical location, then it definitely helps promote the sale.
And are you also doing wholesale as well, or
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
and
Yes.
where are you selling now? Because I think when we started, I don't remember if you were doing wholesale.
So I had paused it for the rebranding. So we are selling 4 or 5 different states.
So are you selling in more wholesale than you were, or
I would say that the ratio with like what we sell on online and wholesale is about the same actually.
wow, that is
Mhm.
a really big
Mhm.
difference, I think, from when we
Yeah.
started, when we first
Mhm.
talked about this. What advice would you give other CPG founders about investing in branding?
At least for me, if you feel like your product has never met this vision that you have in your mind of it, then it's time for a rebrand for sure.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. Because you have to resonate with your product. And it
Yeah.
sounds like you always had a vision for your product and you knew what was inside was so valuable, which is
Mhm.
why, you became so successful, I'm sure. But the fact that you could really like make what is in the real world match what your vision has been all along is so beautiful. And that's, I think, what packaging and marketing and all the way through to the website too is all about. It's like getting that founder vision and like their embodiment of the brand there so that everybody can understand that, even without talking to them.
And I mean, it speaks volumes for your company too, to be able to listen to the vision and the directives and the point of view that I had and be able to create that in a physical form.
Thank you so much. We worked very hard at that. So when we started, you were selling in your store, you were
Mhm.
selling to a few wholesale clients. What would you say the impact on sales would be?
That's a complex question. One, because of the times that we're living in and the years that we have since my branding happened in some interesting times. When I did the rebranding, I also increased my product pricing.
Well, I guess it allows you to, right?
Yeah, it did. Yep. I think I knew the product pricing needed to happen within a 4 year period from when I opened to when I enrolled in the business class. My costs had increased something like 70% just in that 4 years.
Wow. And probably more since then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
So I knew at that point I needed to make a change, allowing one to increase the visuals of my product from what was conceived as like a homemade product to a professional product. It allowed me to price it in the professional realm. And we changed containers too. So our container sizes overall were up like 100K in gross sales. It's just very complex.
How do you decide which products to bring to market, and how does customer feedback influence that process? And I'm so curious because I know that herbs and medicinals in general, like that's there's a huge amount, just thousands. So I'd love to hear a bit about your process of how do you choose them.
My process hasn't changed since when I was in school. So it always begins in the clinical realm, behind the counter with customers coming in and asking for formulations. At Megan and Company, we are products that people can come in the retail setting, but I'm also a clinical apothecary, so people can come in and meet with me one-on-one. And then I'm also considered a community herbalist. And a community herbalist is people just walking in the door and asking for a custom formulation at the counter. So there's a lot of creative output that happens all day long. And most of the formulations that end up as um, formulations for grab and go, as I call on the retail floor, have been formulations that I find myself repeating over and over again as custom formulations. So my community has a lot of arthritis, has a lot of colds and flus, has a need for blood sugar regulation, all of these things that if I find myself repeating over and over a similar formulation, I say, this is something that doesn't need to be customized. I can make a formulation where people can just walk in the door and grab it off the floor.
I think it's very interesting to hear these specific things like arthritis, like colds. Could you give a few more examples of things that herbs can help? Because I think that's something that a lot of people are totally unaware of.
So my store has set up by symptom, so I can kind of go through each different symptom category. So I do have a cold and flu section. Now this would be more of just like your acute immune supports, but also chest, cough support, boosting your immune system. I have an adrenal section for feeling burnt out. So I work with the adrenals a lot for go-getters, but also for women entering premenopause because the adrenals are so shot during menopause. So this is a section that I really focus on for menopause. We have a section, of course, that is called our pain and inflammation. So this has both topicals, but also internal teas for arthritic conditions, just overall like heat signs if you're holding a lot of edema, water weight, or joint pain. And then I have a section for the nervous system. So sleep, regulation, depression, anxiety. Then we have our topicals, so just a facial section. So things to help with fine lines, wrinkles, creams, body care. And then we have our mom and baby line. So pregnancy, post-birth.
What a great alternative to just having a million supplements, because I think that's what a lot of people go to. I would love to actually hear a little bit about that. Of course, you could get like a supplement that maybe has some of the herbs inside it,
Mhm.
but are there specific benefits maybe to doing it, straight as the herbs, the way that you're presenting it?
Sure. Yes. So one of our blends is called Daily Boost, and this one is just a really nutrient dense blend that's really high in vitamins and minerals. So it will be really bioavailable for you to absorb those minerals in. And that is really the difference between taking a capsule and a tea. Everything is easily absorbable. Your digestive system doesn't have to break anything down. And so that is really the difference of a water base versus a capsule. And a lot of my clinical work is people bring in like their 20 different supplements. And a lot of times they're getting overdosed on things that are not water soluble that stay in the body. So they're getting too much of something. Or they're having autoimmune reactions and they're taking supplements that are stimulating their immune system and things like that, that we can really just hone in, cross-reference, because supplements are fantastic, but there is a lot of marketing right now that take the supplement for this thing, take this supplement for this thing. And when you you utilize supplements like medication, you're going to have interactions as well.
That is very eye-opening. Thank you so much for explaining that. I feel like I could go on with like a million more questions on those lines. But I'd love to also hear, just to pivot a little bit, your other challenges in business. Of course, you mentioned you grew so fast. So what
Sure.
are some other challenges that you ran into?
Looking back, I've come to realize that the challenges that I have had growing have always been a reflection of myself. So it's always been where I have been in that moment. I'm like projecting it into my store. So I'm hiring the people that I'm struggling with, I don't have enough boundaries with. I am working and calling in people into my clinic that I haven't developed strong enough for me, it's a lot of boundaries in realizing who I am who I am as a person and what I am worth as a person, and acknowledging the strength of my voice and when to say no and when to put my own self first. So that has been the biggest eye-opening thing about owning my own business is I am running a machine, but in the end, I have to think of myself first as the lead and the orchestrator of this machine. And looking back, I saw all these holes in my protection and my walls, and I was trying to fill it with people that I needed to learn the lesson.
That's beautiful, Megan. I think that's extremely relatable. I think a lot of the times we like to look at things extremely logically, and it's like, oh, you read the business books or you listen to the podcasts, but it's so true. Everything that you put out into the world in one way or another is a reflection of who you are and what you're dealing with.
And I hope that I still continue to have challenges or like see them because that just means that I'm still evolving, still growing, and it's not ever a plateau. Something very much about learning my own intuition and my own gut response to about every interaction. As if I have an interaction and I don't sit well with it, or if I'm constantly thinking about it at the end of the day, it's like, what happened in there? Like, what was it in that interaction or that event that I allowed myself to do something, to receive something that allows me to feel this way in the aftermath? And so, what can I do in the future so I don't feel this way?
How did you learn to kind of overcome that? Because I want to hear a bit more of like your strategies and growth.
Yeah.
And this is such a specific problem that I bet so many people deal with. How did you learn to kind of reflect on that and grow through that?
Yeah. I think there's a common saying that it's like first it's the pebble, then it's the rock, then it's the boulder. I didn't see that until it's the boulder. And then you begin to see the pebbles afterwards, especially when hiring staff. And I think it was after my third staff event, I realized I was hiring the same sort of person over and over again. And it was a person that it didn't click well in the apothecary. I hired that same dynamic, that same personality over and over again. And I wasn't seeing the pattern. I wasn't seeing that it was actually something within me that needed that person
Wow.
and that I needed to correct what was inside of me to correct the situation that I was creating.
Wow, that is so interesting, Megan. I feel like that could be applied to so many different areas of life, like relationship, thinking about, my dating life of the past, of choosing kind of the same personality over and over again and being like, why is he
Mhm.
so happy? It's like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I need to reflect on myself and see what, like you said, what needs are they providing for you that you keep choosing that, right?
Yeah,
But it's
exactly.
very difficult to get out of that pattern and
It
to
is.
recognize it and then get out of it and choose something different.
It's very true. It's very true. So first I saw the pattern of this person and I saw it in a hire, but then it spread out through my whole life into my childhood and friendships. And it was like once that happened, it was this explosion and I was able to see these patterns in all of my life and everything that I do. So it was this one particular hire that repeated this personality that cascaded into the rest of my life. And just like you said, Lauren, once I saw that pattern, I could see all of these other patterns that were happening.
And
Yep.
it also, I feel like it reflects kind of on, your business is going to do as well as you do. We're not all born entrepreneurs or, born into like this perfect state of like growth and euphoria. You have to learn and kind of get there. And that takes a lot of self-development.
It's true. Yeah. And if you are an entrepreneur, that's what you're signing up for. I don't think that's spoken at all with entrepreneurship, that you are creating a business. And if that creation is essentially just you're putting yourself in a visual form, and
Yeah.
you have to force yourself to see yourself outside of that. And if you're not willing to make corrections and see that, um, I don't know if you're going to survive.
Were there moments where you did have to pivot strategy? And like, what did you learn in those
Yeah.
moments?
Actually, at the end of 2024, I had just done like my end of year review. And for the second year in a row, Megan and Company was negative. And I had this moment where I knew I had to let go of all of my staff. At that time, we had 6 members of staff. And I knew that the only way to survive or keep going was to let go of everyone except for my manager and myself. For about 3 months or so, I had seen these numbers. I wasn't oblivious to these numbers. So I was kind of preparing myself. I called my manager into the office and I told her that this is it. It was just going to be the two of us. And I was going to try it out for a year and see if the two of us could make it for 1 year. And if we couldn't make it together, then that was it. Then Megan and Co. was just not meant to happen, and we would find something else. And so at that point, I just let go of all control. I had been trying to control everything because for 48 months, 2 years, there had been, or not 48 months, 24 months, knowing that cash flow, things weren't working well, you try to hold on to it and make everything work better. So I made that pivot. I released all that control and I just let it go, knowing that I had the vision when I was in school of becoming a healer, bringing this to my community. And if I couldn't get back to the root, the basis of just myself in that position and my manager helping me with the products, if we couldn't make it with just that, then it wasn't meant to be. And so after a year last year, we were up like 300%. It was just this really pivotal moment of knowing that one, I needed to be the face of my company because up until that point, I had been staffing people in the retail setting and I had been lost behind the scenes and my customers needed me. They needed to see me. And two, that control aspect. We're still rolling and we added on a part-time hire this year, and yeah, we're feeling great.
Wow, Megan, thank you for sharing that with us. I know that to get to that point, you were probably thinking about it for quite a while. I don't know, me as an entrepreneur, I do the same where I'm like, okay, I know I need to do this, but when do I do it?
Mhm.
How long do I try this out for to make sure this is going to work? There's so many moments where you're pivoting or wondering, should I give up? And I don't know if give up is the right word, but just challenging.
Yeah. Me starting the story of seeing that connection with that first staff member, releasing that connection. This was the same sort of letting go of the control that I had on the shop too, and releasing the need to control what my future was bringing and just trust that I was here for the purpose of what my intuition brought me here for.
I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit in our conversation.
Yep.
If you could give like one piece of advice to someone who's like launching their first
Mhm.
product or first business, what would that be?
It would be trusting your intuition, trusting your gut, because at the end, that's the only thing that can guide you.
Yeah, absolutely. What's next for Megan and Co?
Since we've been expanding, I've been eliminating products.
Uh-huh.
We're working with the top selling 20% of the products.
I think that's very
Yeah.
smart.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to say, okay, maybe you can have your special blends like a seasonal blend or something, but
Yep.
like really focusing in on what are those best sellers, what are going to help you and help the most people.
That's what we did. We kept the top 20, the 20 below that, we moved to seasonal, and then the rest we eliminated.
And you're still the healer in your community, so people
Yeah,
can still come visit you and get the help they
exactly.
need.
And can
Hmm.
they still get the customized products
They
if they want
can.
that?
Yeah,
Okay, so that's where it can
absolutely.
also
Yeah,
kind of
that's where it
like you won't have
filters.
everything, but
Yeah.
if somebody wants something, you're there as their healer to create those custom
Yeah.
products.
I'm also writing a epilepsy protocol book, particularly for caretakers. So
I love that. That is really cool. Thank you so much,
yeah,
Megan. I
thanks,
really
Lauren.
appreciate you and your time and hearing about everything that's going on with Megan and Co., all of the ups and downs and um, where you're headed.
Of course,
Yeah.
happy to be here.
Thanks for
Thank you.
joining us on this episode of Entrepreneur Mind Speak. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye.